Welcome to Created Healthy. I'm Dawn Combs. It's a common idea that God gave us everything we need in nature, but do we believe it enough to walk that out in truth? Often the very same people who say this go looking for answers on how to use food and medicine from man-made sources. Everything man creates comes with a user's manual. Why would God be any different? I challenge you to join me in seeking revelation about our body, mind, soul, and spirit health by digging into His written word and in practicing pure science in the visible world of His creation. I'm not sure that we as humans ever fully escape the childhood development phase where we rebel against rules. I think it just continues, it moves into adulthood. Today I'm in Psalms 1 through 3, and David is writing beautiful poems and songs about just this. He's pondering this rule rebelling nature that is in us, and it's kind of cool to have him be so appreciative of this about us, and also he's looking at what God does in response. So he starts out in Psalm 1 where he's talking about how amazing these rules are and being appreciative. And I want to come back to this. But he moves into Psalm 2. He's talking about the kings of the earth and how much these are really important people, and they feel like the rules that are written plainly for us in nature and that God has given us in the Old Testament are just their slavery. It's too confining for them to be able to have what they want, and so they're trying to throw those shackles off. And David says that God laughs at them and says to David that you are my son. So David is willing to follow these laws. So he is God's chosen one, his son. And so he has been promised the nations as an inheritance. I love what he says here. He says that God promises that David will shatter them, all of these nations with these kings who don't want to follow rules, like earthenware. And I think that reminds me that when we were back in Leviticus early on, that when something had gone unclean into anything that's earthenware, they're just always smashing dishes. If anything touched a dish that wasn't clean or whole or had made it unworthy, they just smashed it. And this is, I guess, in a culture where you can just make a new dish pretty easily, makes sense. But what David is getting us to think about here is that these kings are unclean. They are not whole. They're not standing before God in wholeness or balance. And so they are vessels that can be broken, just like earthenware. Kind of a neat call back to the law. Finally, David is talking about fleeing from his son Absalom, and he's claiming Jesus, God, as his shield, and recognizing that God will protect him because he follows the law. So back to Psalm 1, he says, "How blessed is the man who doesn't follow counsel of the wicked, but delights in the law." So he's saying that the person that thinks about the law all day long, is constantly meditating on it, has it in his mind, has it as the guidance for all of his actions, is so very blessed. And this is what is cool to me. It makes this man like a tree that is firmly planted by moving water. And that this tree, because it's firmly planted by clean, fresh water, is yielding fruit at the right time. It doesn't wither, and it prospers in whatever it does. And then he goes into all the bad things that happen to the wicked people that don't meditate on God's law that we've been talking about in Leviticus, and all the bad things that kind of fall into their path, and the things that that happen to them as a result that aren't good. To a desert people, a tree firmly planted by clean, fresh water is going to be like an oasis. And I think he is talking about these trees never wilt, so they're never without water. There's never a moment when their leaves, in plant science, leaves remain what's called turgid. They stay filled and in their proper shape and upright, which is the opposite of wilting, when they have enough water. The water pressure of constant access to water keeps the leaf from wilting. And so this tree is always able to access water. It has deep roots. It is near water that is not going to be filled with sickness. The fruit coming about at the right time means that the tree isn't stressed. It doesn't have to put on fruit early or late or never, or multiple times in a year, because it's desperately trying to produce new trees in a situation that it sees danger. Trees will respond to all of that. This tree is firmly planted. It never wilts, and it yields fruit at the right time. The other thing that someone who lives in a culture that sees this freshwater only at oases, these places in the desert where there are long areas where there's no access to water, and then you come upon this place with all of this lush growth, these large trees, and running water. It is a rarity. It is something that is precious, and the trees themselves that are firmly planted are providing a service. So somebody who is meditating on God's law is one of these trees, and often it would be the date palm. So the date palm anchors a desert oasis, and it starts to create its own environment where any moisture that drops is retained and recycled. And so the ground begins to change. The soil changes because it is retaining moisture. It becomes deeper. It becomes, the structure of the soil changes. And eventually, these original anchored date palms give rise to the almonds and the olives and the things that are important in industry at this time. But without the trees that are firmly planted by water, these other trees can't thrive. And then you have animal life and human life that can come in and gather the fruits. And I think that I feel like David understands this deeper ecosystem, that the tree, I think I've read this before where I'm understanding that it's just about the tree, but it isn't. It isn't just about the one tree that's firmly planted. It's what that tree is capable of. And I think we can support that because he mentions the fruit. And throughout the Bible, even just what we've read so far, what's most important about a Christian walk is what fruit you are producing. And those people that are benefiting from your fruit that God wishes to reach out to. So this tree that David is talking about, that meditates day and night all the time, thinks about God's law, is creating an environment for other trees to gather, for other life to happen. That tree is never without a connection to life for itself, but it is bearing literal fruit, and it is bearing fruit of an environment that it creates, so that there are other trees that bear fruit and are firmly rooted next to the water. The Psalms are a wonderful break when we are reading through the Bible, and it can sometimes get tough to wade through. And this is a beautiful feeling of openness and lush greenery and flowing water that is appropriate as to what can happen when we don't rebel, when we follow the rules. The rules aren't there to confine us. They are there to plant us firmly by flowing water. They are there to give us health. They are there to set us free. And when we follow them, we have the best of everything that God has to offer. I pray that God is blessing you today and that He brings you back to study again on another day with me. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with a friend. And I'm always interested in hearing what God is laying on your heart. So drop me a rating or review, or join the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube at Dawn Combs Really.